We humans depend on biodiversity for our health, food, economy, and well-being. Despite this, humans are causing a huge loss of biodiversity with many of our activities. The increase in the human population has led to rapid growth in agriculture, livestock farming, fishing, urban growth, and large-scale industrial activity that has resulted in pollution and overexploitation of natural resources, including the overexploitation of the biosphere. We are causing such a loss of biodiversity that, according to scientists, we are causing the 6th mass extinction in the history of the planet, which is also the fastest of all the mass extinctions that have existed since life appeared on planet Earth. Causes of biodiversity loss. First cause: habitat destruction and fragmentation. The main cause of biodiversity loss is the destruction of natural habitats due to human activities, such as the occupation of natural land for agriculture, tree felling, urbanization, the drainage of swampy areas, or forest fires. All of this is pushing thousands of species to the brink of extinction. The destruction of the rainforest is the greatest threat to the planet's biodiversity, since its richness of species is enormous. Other very delicate ecosystems with great biodiversity are coral reefs, which are being destroyed at high speed. Wetlands, swamps, marshes, etc. are also being mistreated, which are places of great biological productivity, used by waterfowl for breeding, feeding, and resting during their migrations. For centuries, man has drained swamps to turn them into farmland and has used coastal marshes to build its ports and cities, so their area has decreased drastically around the world. The destruction or deterioration of the habitat where living beings live forces them to migrate or causes their death by changing the conditions of the place where they live, such as increased sun exposure and wind, death of the organisms on which it fed, etc. Habitat fragmentation, as a consequence of agricultural development, industrial and urban, into smaller fragments, makes ecosystems more fragile as it diminishes their capacity for self-regulation. For example, in smaller spaces, it is more difficult to regulate temperature or for a predator to get enough food, etc. Furthermore, when a species is confined to small territories, the island effect occurs. Inbreeding and genetic drift can drag a small population to its disappearance. Second cause: introduction of invasive species, which are new or exotic species that, upon arrival, find themselves in a new environment, where they may be free of predators or diseases, being able to displace native species due to their greater success in competing with native species for food or space, and sometimes they constitute real plagues. Man is a great introducer of new species into ecosystems where they did not previously exist. Sometimes he introduces them voluntarily to fight pests or for his tastes and hobbies, and other times involuntarily with their travels and the transport of goods. This is especially dangerous in places of special sensitivity, such as islands and ancient lakes, which are usually rich in endemic species because they are places where evolution has occurred with very little exchange with neighboring areas due to logical geographical difficulties. In Hawaii, for example, it is estimated that 90% of the island's original bird species have disappeared as a consequence of human pressure and the introduction of animals such as rats and others that are effective predators of birds that were not used to this type of threat. Another example is the alga Caulerpa prolifera, which was accidentally introduced into the Mediterranean, and because it is not known by the living beings of the Mediterranean, it has no predators and is spreading with great density on the coastal seabed, preventing the growth of algae and aquatic plants. It also greatly reduces fishing because it does not serve as food. It even has a certain toxicity, altering the successive trophic levels. New species can also carry diseases. For example, the disappearance of the native crayfish in some areas of Spain has been due to a fungus carried by the American crayfish. Third cause: pollution of soil, water, and atmosphere. Toxic substances such as plastics, industrial chemicals, and pesticides directly harm organisms or alter the ecosystems where they live. Pollution is usually caused by pesticides, fertilizers, industrial discharges and emissions, and waste from very different sources. The use of pesticides and herbicides not only eliminates living beings considered harmful, but also eliminates birds and other animals that feed on insects or plants poisoned with these products. Harmful substances degrade natural habitats, even in the most protected reserves. This happens, for example, with the contamination of rivers, groundwater, acid rain, destruction of the ozone layer, etc. Fourth cause: climate change. The increase in global temperature and changes in weather patterns, such as the advance of deserts, the increase in droughts or floods, alter ecosystems and force species to adapt, migrate, or die. This especially affects sensitive species, such as corals, which are very sensitive to changes in water temperature, or those species that live at the poles or in mountain areas that cannot migrate to colder areas. Fifth cause: industrialization and intensification of agricultural practices. The intensive use of land for agriculture, especially for monocultures, turns diverse ecosystems into farmland, reducing the diversity of plants and animals. Monocultures also require the use of larger amounts of pesticides because they facilitate the spread of pests and diseases. Many agricultural and livestock species or varieties that are more resistant to diseases and pests, or that require less water or food, are becoming extinct due to higher yielding varieties, which require more water, fertilizers, and pesticides. In addition, the use of pesticides and fertilizers affects both non-target species, as well as soil and water. An example of fertilizers affecting water is marine dead zones, or hypoxic zones, which form when fertilizers from agriculture reach the sea, causing a phenomenon called eutrophication, which causes excessive algae growth. The most superficial algae block the light from the rest of the algae, which die. When they die and decompose, the decomposers consume the oxygen in the water, creating unsustainable conditions for marine life and generating dead zones. The same thing happens in rivers and lakes when a lot of fertilizers arrive. Sixth cause: overexploitation of certain species or ecosystems. Excessive hunting, uncontrolled fishing, and forest exploitation such as logging are depleting the populations of many species. In addition, the intensive collection of plants and animals for human consumption or industrial use unbalances ecosystems. In hunting, we can include collecting, which especially affects insects such as butterfly or beetle collections, and the use of exotic species as pets. In addition, the hunting of vermin and predators to their extermination was common until very recently. They were considered a threat to livestock, hunting, and man, and for this reason, they tried to eliminate animals such as wolves, bears, birds of prey, snakes, etc. When in reality, many of these species were beneficial to man, such as snakes and raptors that feed on barn pests and agricultural pests, such as rodents and rabbits. In the case of some species, it has led to their extinction or near extinction, as was the case with the dodo, the passenger pigeon, the American prairie bison, the bearded vulture, some varieties of whales, and many other animals. Currently, the trade in exotic species, collecting, the capture of species with supposed healing properties, especially appreciated in the Chinese pharmacopoeia, mass tourism, etc., threaten many different species. Consequences of biodiversity loss. Ecosystem imbalance. When species disappear, food chains are altered and nutrient cycles are disrupted, which can lead to the degradation of the entire ecosystem. Each species plays an essential role in the functioning of ecosystems, such as making organic matter, decomposing organic matter, providing inorganic matter in the form of mineral salts necessary for producers, balancing the number of herbivores, forming soil, regulating the climate, protecting against erosion, producing oxygen, and so on. Reduced ecological resilience. Diverse ecosystems are more resistant to changes, such as droughts or floods, and are more resistant to erosion because they have more vegetation. Biodiversity loss reduces the ability of ecosystems to adapt to disturbances, which can lead to their collapse. Cultural and aesthetic impact. Biodiversity is an integral part of the culture of many communities, especially indigenous communities, who depend directly on their natural environment. The loss of species also implies a loss of cultural and spiritual diversity, in addition to the loss of recreational and tourist value. Measures to mitigate biodiversity loss. Habitat protection and restoration. It is the most important measure to prevent biodiversity loss. It's about returning damaged ecosystems to their natural state and creating and managing protected areas, such as nature reserves and national parks, where ecosystems can be maintained or restored without human interference. Regulation of hunting and fishing. Implement sustainable management policies that limit the overexploitation of species. Establishing fishing quotas, creating no fishing zones, and promoting environmentally friendly hunting and fishing practices can help preserve wildlife populations. Control of invasive species. Establish monitoring and control systems to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species. This may include eradication campaigns for non-native species or the implementation of biological barriers that prevent invasion. Climate change. Mitigation. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the consumption of animal products from intensive livestock farming, the use of renewable energies, improving energy efficiency, and reforestation can help mitigate climate change, which is a key factor in biodiversity loss. Reforestation and forest conservation. Reforestation helps restore lost habitats and capture carbon from the atmosphere. In addition, the conservation of existing forests, especially tropical forests, is essential to preserve high biological diversity. Public education and awareness. Promote environmental education and raise public awareness about the importance of biodiversity and the threats it faces. Knowledge can motivate people to make more responsible decisions and participate in conservation. International legislation and policies. Implement and enforce national and international laws that protect biodiversity. Examples include the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, and the Nagoya Protocol, which seek to promote biodiversity conservation globally. Promote research and innovation. Scientific research is crucial to better understand ecosystems, their interactions, and the most effective ways to conserve biodiversity. Innovations in biotechnology, genetics, and sustainable management can be key to curbing biodiversity loss. Summarizing, the most important points of the video are the following. First, despite the great benefits of biodiversity for our health, food, economy, and well-being, we don't stop causing biodiversity loss and species extinction. Second, the main causes of biodiversity loss are habitat destruction, the introduction of invasive species, soil, water, and air pollution, industrialization and intensification of agricultural practices, climate change, and overexploitation. Third, the main consequences of biodiversity loss are ecosystem imbalance, decreased ecological resilience, the loss of services to humanity, and the cultural and aesthetic impact. Fourth, the main measures to mitigate biodiversity loss are the protection and restoration of habitats, sustainable agriculture and livestock farming, the regulation of overexploitation, the control of invasive species, climate change mitigation, reforestation and forest conservation, public education and awareness, international legislation and policies, and promoting research and innovation.